Hey everyone, this is Mike Litwin from Litwin Creative. I hope you're having a great day. I'd like to start off this video by thanking all of my subscribers. I had started an initiative to get 100 subscribers in the first 30 days of relaunching my channel, and I'm now at 107. So as a result, I now get a fuller range of features from YouTube, including this nice custom URL, instead of the ugly conglomeration of random glyphs that I was stuck with when I started. So thank you to everyone who subscribed. Thank you to everyone who helped spread the word. And in return, I have some gifts for you. No, not gifts. GIFs.
It's peanut butter jelly time.
Today we'll be looking at how to make animated GIFs using some programs in Adobe Creative Cloud. And yes, I know that technically it's pronounced GIF, but as far as I'm concerned, GIF is a peanut butter. And if I pronounced it that way, then my little GIF joke wouldn't have worked. So I'm going to keep on calling it GIF, and you can all feel free to debate about it in the comment section. If it makes everyone happy, I could combine the two and call them good GIFs, but I'm not sure how long that trend will last. Now, animated GIFs are obviously not a new technology. They've been around a long time, I think since the late 80s, and I actually made my first one in the mid to late 90s. And then they just sort of died out for a while. But now I'm pleased to say they've made a resurgence because of how easy and fun they are to use on social media and virtual groups. And there's a lot of websites that can make animated GIFs for you if you just upload your own images. But I've had mixed results with the quality that comes out of those. Sometimes they put their own watermark on it. And I just like the creative control that comes with doing it yourself using Adobe programs. So today I'll be showing you how to make a couple different types of animated GIFs. GIFs that are made from a series of images and GIFs that are made from video. And we'll look at how to do this in two different programs, Adobe Photoshop and Adobe After Effects. And there are, of course, time codes in the description, so you can skip right to whichever one of these interests you without having to listen to my voice drone on through the whole video. So that being said, let's jump right in.
There you go.
Now, like I said before, animated GIFs aren't exactly a new technology. They've actually been around since 1987, so it's really come as no surprise that it's nothing more than an old-school frame-by-frame sequence. If any of you ever made a homemade cartoon by flipping through little pictures that you drew in the corners of a paper book, remember paper books? This is really no different. The animated GIF is just a glorified digital flipbook. So when we set out to make a frame-by-frame animated GIF in Photoshop, we want to start by having each of the images that we want to make into frames put into separate layers. And in celebration of reaching my first 100 subscribers, I've gone ahead and drawn my own version of the 100 emoji, and that's what I'm going to animate for this lesson. And as you can see, I have this graphic in 6 different layers, each one set in a different color, and I'm going to animate it so that it cycles through all the colors. So with our images already set up in separate layers, the first thing we want to do is open our timeline window. And that can be found up here under the window menu. You scroll down here to timeline, you select that, and you can see that this window opens up down here at the bottom. Next, we are going to select the type of animation that we want. We are doing a frame by frame right now. We're doing a create a frame animation. So we're going to select that. And then after we select it, we're going to actually click on that in the menu. You can see it's already set up the timeline for us. This is where our frames are eventually going to go. Now the next thing that we would do is we would go to this menu here on the top left and we would select make frames from layers. But before we do that, there's something very important I should point out. Once we convert the layers to frames, this background layer is no longer going to be a background. It is going to be a frame just like everything else. So instead of seeing these graphics animating against a white background, what you're going to see is each one of these cycling through with no background, and then somewhere in there you'll just have a blank white frame stuck into the sequence. And so if you actually want a white background, what you need to do is you need to have 6 copies of this layer and then individually flatten them with each one of these images. So each one of these images actually has its own white background. But we're not going to do that. What we're going to do is we're just going to make it a transparent background. So we're just going to go ahead and delete this background layer. And so with all of these layers now with no background layer, we're going to come here back to this menu. We're going to click on that and we're going to select make frames from layers. And as you can see, it's taken each of the layers and made it into a separate frame in this timeline sequence. From here, you have the option of controlling how long the animation stays on each one of these. You just, 0.1 seconds, 0.2 seconds, 0.5 seconds, a whole second. And it doesn't have to be the same for each one. You could actually set a different amount of time and have it hold on one of these frames longer than the rest. But for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to go ahead and keep them all with no delay as they already were. And now we're ready to export the GIF. So in order to do that, we are going to go up here to Export. And we are going to select Save for Web Legacy. Once we click on that, what we have here is a variety of options. You can change the number of colors if you want to break it down to a smaller amount of colors to save memory. You can dither this thing so that the image quality goes down. You can change the image size down here. We're not going to mess with any of this right now. We're going to keep it just exactly the way it is. And we are going to have this so that it's looping, so that when it gets to the end of the animation, it recycles over and over again. You could actually have it where it only goes once and then stops at the last frame and just stays that way. We're going to go ahead and have it looping forever. So with all of this, we're going to go ahead and hit save, and I'm just going to go ahead and title this 100.gif. We are going to put this here in our tutorial and hit save. And now, if we go over here, there's our file, and you can see as I selected on it, it's already showing you what it looks like. I can go ahead and hit the space bar here and give you a preview. And there it is. It's actually a little bit trippy when I stare at it too long. So let's go ahead and turn off of that. So that's how you make a simple frame-by-frame animation with images that are already set up on separate layers within Photoshop. Now let's say that you have a series of images that are not already set up within Photoshop on separate layers. Let's say that you like to do your graphics work or your typesetting in Adobe Illustrator or Adobe InDesign. And let's say that you've exported those as separate JPEGs or PNG files and they're saved somewhere on your hard drive. Or let's say that you have a series of photographs that you want to cycle through and you want to make an animated GIF out of that, which I just so happen to have something like that here. I have this photo set called Dragon Photo Stack, and if we select on those and preview it, what you can see is this is a little dragon that my daughter made out of polymer clay, as something that she really enjoys doing. And let's say that we wanted to take this series of photos of this little dragon spinning around on its stick and turn it into an animation. Now, are we supposed to really take all 19 of these photos, open them up separately, copy them, and paste them into layers within Photoshop? No, that would absolutely take forever. So there's a much quicker way to do that. Let's go back to Photoshop, and we go up here to File, and there's a menu called Scripts under the File menu. If we go under here, there's an option called Load Files into Stack. When we click on that, it gives us a little sub-menu here with a Browse button here that lets us search our hard drive. And as you can see, it's already on that folder. I'm going to select all of the photos that are in that folder, and I'm going to hit Open. And before I open everything, there are a couple of little options down here at the bottom. One of those is Attempt to Automatically Align Image Sources. I'm going to go ahead and click that, and the reason why is because even though I put this dragon on a tripod, it's got this horizon line here in the middle that I guarantee at some point the camera probably shifted a little bit as I was touching the shutter button. And to make sure that this goes smoothly, we're going to go ahead and attempt to automatically align the image, the source images. So we're going to hit OK. And as you can see on the right-hand side over here in the Layers palette, Photoshop is taking each one of those photos and turning it into a separate layer, which we will eventually convert over into frames. Now, as it's doing this, is going to take a little minute here to align the layers, just like we asked it to do. And once it's done doing that, if we look really, really closely, we can probably see areas where the background is just showing through a little bit, because once it started to align the layers, not everything is going to be exactly where we had it when the photo was shot. And you can see the background layer is showing a little bit there. So what we're going to do is, in order to keep this thing from getting too big, we're going to crop this down to about this size right here. And then another important thing to note is that I shot these on my phone, which has a fairly high resolution. So we're going to go up here to Image, and we're going to go to Image Size, and we're going to knock down the resolution a bit. This is 842 pixels wide by 3000 pixels tall. I don't really think we need it to be that big, so we're going to go ahead and shrink this down to, say, about 400 pixels wide by 670. At 72 DPI, because this is going to be on screen, we hit OK, and that's going to help keep the memory down a little bit. And from here, everything should look pretty familiar. We're going to go back down here to our timeline window. It already has create frame animation selected, so we're going to click on that. It sets up the timeline for us. We're going to go back over here to the menu on the top right hand corner, and we're going to make frames from layers. And as you can see, it's taken all 19 of those photos and it has set it up into a sequence right here in the timeline. And once again, we have our times that we can have this. We can set it to 0 seconds. We can set it to 0.1 seconds. I'm going to keep this at 0 seconds again so it cycles through pretty fast. We're going to go up here to File, and we are ready to export this again. So we go to Export, Save for Web Legacy. And this screen should look familiar. It's exactly what we had last time. We're going to go ahead and loop this forever so it keeps turning around and around. I'm going to leave it at 256 colors. I'm not going to dither it. I want to keep this as high quality as I can because it's nice and small at 400 pixels wide. So we're going to hit Save. And under the animated GIFs, we're going to call this Dragon Stack. Why not? Hit Save. And now, if we go over here, we should be able to get a nice preview of this. And there we are. Now, of course, my white balance was off on a few of these, so the background is kind of bouncing from white to yellow a little bit. We could actually fix that by going into each one of those layers in the Photoshop file and selecting the white point of each one of them and making them consistent. But we're not going to do that for the sake of this lesson. But what you can see is we have a nice little animation of this dragon turning around and around and around. Now, there is another method of creating animated GIFs with Photoshop's timeline tool that we haven't looked at yet, and that is to use the video timeline feature instead of the frame animation feature. And to demonstrate how we do that, we're going to go and reopen this Photoshop file that we worked with before that had the 100 on it. As you can see, these frames are still set up down here in our frame animation timeline. We're going to select all of these, and before we delete them, notice that each one is set to 0 seconds. This is about as fast as you can possibly go, and that's going to play a factor in our frame rate when we change this over to a video timeline. But the first thing we're going to do is come to this collapsible menu and we're going to delete this animation. All right, the second thing we're going to do is go back into that menu again and we're going to convert it to video timeline. Now, before I do that, if you'll remember when we first started, there was a drop menu here in the middle of the timeline when we started from scratch that said frame animation or video timeline. That's what we would have selected if we were doing this from scratch. But since we're not, we're just going to convert to video timeline. And you can see what it's done. It's taken all the layers that are in the layer palette and it's stacked it into a video timeline. The first thing that we want to do is we want to make all of these layers visible. And then next thing that's worth noting is that this automatically defaults to a 30 frames per second frame rate, which is fairly standard for most videos. Because we had each frame taking up 0 seconds last time, we're going to want to make this as quickly as possible, which means each one of these is only going to be 1 frame long. Now, the bummer about doing this in Photoshop is because when we select all of them, we're not able to pull them all back at one time. It only lets us select one at a time. So we literally have to go to each and every layer and pull them back to 1 frame each. This is fine if you only have, 6 or so layers like we do here. But if you've got something that has, 90 or 100 layers each put into frames, you don't want to have to individually do all of those. So we're going to go down here to the slider and we're going to zoom in. And that's not making them longer, it's just zooming in tighter. And we're going to take each one of these and we're going to drag them over so 1 frame follows the one before it. And now as you can see, there's the blue one visible, there's the yellow one visible, orange one visible, etc., etc. Now what we're going to do is we are going to go up here and make sure that loop playback is selected so we can test it. We're going to hit play. And as you can see, we get our animation. Now, this looks exactly like what we did before. So why are we doing it in video timeline? Well, video timeline is a lot more useful when you're actually making an animated GIF out of a video. But there are some times when it would be applicable to an animation such as this. And here's when. Do you remember before when we did frame by frame animation, I said that if you wanted to drop a background behind it and have a solid white background, you would have to add that to literally every single frame. Otherwise, it would just show up as a frame by itself somewhere in the sequence. Well, now what we can do is we can actually add a layer here, and you see it automatically adds the layer right there for us. If we were to paint that white and move it all the way down to the bottom and to the back, it automatically puts it in the back. If we pull this all the way to the beginning of the animation and we grab the edge of this and we only have that background visible behind all of these. Now we have a solid background that we did not have to add to each and every single layer before we made a frame-by-frame animation. We had it dumped into the video timeline for us, and now when we play it, you can see that background stays there the entire time. Now from here, everything should be pretty familiar as to what we did before. We go up to File, we go up to Save As, we go to Export, Save for Web Legacy, and once again we're going to have GIF selected, hit Save, and let's go back into where we saved this other one, where we have 100.gif. We'll go ahead and make this 100b.gif, save. And then when we go back in here, you can see that there's the one we did first, and here's the one we did second, which is a bit smoother and a whole lot faster. So that's how we use the video timeline. Alright, so if you've jumped here from the beginning of the video, we just looked at how to animate frame by frame in Photoshop. Now we're going to look at how to handle some moving images in Adobe After Effects. Using the frame by frame option of Photoshop is great if you're animating something that doesn't move around the stage like this one, or something where the motion is very, very minimal, like this drag and stack example we just looked at a minute ago. But what happens if you're doing an animation that looks like this? Now, when you look at this, the first question that comes to mind, the first question that should come to mind is why would anybody ever do this? But the second question that should come to mind is how much planning and how many frames would I have to go through in Photoshop to make sure that this movement was smooth and that all of these elements were in the right positions at the right time? And that could be a bit of a nightmare. But using After Effects, it's actually just as simple as taking the elements that are on the stage and putting them in the key positions where you want them during the specific frames on the timeline when you want them there, and then just letting the software fill in the rest. And I'm not going to go through how to set up and execute all that keyframing right now. I mean, that could be an entire After Effects lesson just in itself. But you can see here how I've taken the three elements that are on the stage, the banana and the gift and the GIF peanut butter, and created anchors at the specific keyframes during the timeline where I want them. And as I scrub this playhead back and forth, you can see how the software just kind of fills in all the rest for me in between. This is a huge time saver because if I ever realize that one of these elements is in the wrong place at the wrong time, I can just change its position or its place on the timeline. I don't have to manually fix all the frames in between. Now, once we have our animation set up and ready, we're going to export it using Adobe Media Encoder. And you'll find that up here in the File menu. But the first thing you want to do is you want to make sure that you've selected the composition that has your main timeline on it. Here it's called GIF number 2. And because this is going to be what gets exported to Adobe Media Encoder, and this is actually going to be the name of your final file. So you're going to go up here to File, and we are going to go to Export, Add to Adobe Media Encoder Queue. Let me click on that. And it bounces it over here to Adobe Media Encoder. You can see that it's actually already been placed right here in the queue window, and you can probably also see that it is defaulting to a H.264 MP4 file. We're not really wanting to do an MP4 for this, so we're going to click on that, and we're going to change the format from H.264. As you can see, we've got a whole array of different things that we can choose from. We're going to choose animated GIF, and I'm not really going to mess around with too many of the settings here. We're just going to go ahead and use the default settings. We're going to hit OK. And then over here is going to be, there it is, GIF2.gif. This is the place where it's going to automatically save it. And if we click on that, we can actually save it to wherever we want. I'm going to put it back here in the animated GIFs folder that we're working from. I'm going to hit Save. And we're going to replace the one that we just looked at. And now it's, as you can see, the status, it's ready to go. We're going to highlight that whole thing, and we're going to go up here to this little play button. And as you can see down here, it's already encoding it. And we're going to fast forward through this for a few seconds. And there we are. It's finished encoding. As you can see from the green check mark up here, it's all done. And this little link here under Output File, if you click on that, it will actually take you directly to where your file is saved in your Finder window. And as you can see, it's given us exactly what we looked at on our timeline. So there you go. There is your successful second GIF. It's peanut butter jelly time. Peanut butter jelly. Peanut butter jelly.
Peanut butter jelly, peanut butter jelly, peanut butter jelly with a baseball bat.
Okay, so up until now, we've looked at ways to create frame-by-frame animated GIFs, but what about creating animations from video? Now, you've seen this plenty of times with reaction GIFs or with video clips that have a custom caption added to them. We will look at how to make animated GIFs from video clips in two different programs. And the first one is going to be Photoshop. And for this, we're going to use a video clip that I have pre-prepared. Um, this is me making a face that I feel like I make this expression a lot. So let's go ahead and get into Photoshop. The first method we're going to use in Photoshop is to convert our video into a frame-by-frame animation. And to do that, we're going to go under the File menu. We're going to go to Import Video Frames to Layers. When we click on that, we're going to go into a menu that I have set up here for video, clips, and here is the video clip that we're going to use. Now, I'm not really sure that I want to have that first part of it with my eyes going back and forth, so we're going to hit open. And when we do, you can see that it gives us some options here. We can go from beginning to end, or we can select a range. I'm not sure I really want the beginning of that thing, so I'm going to hit selected range only. And we're going to grab this playhead here, and we're going to scrub through the video. This is about where I want it to start, right when I'm about to put my hands up and give that really charming look of mine. And so when we put the playhead there, we're going to grab this slider from the beginning and move it right about to where that playhead is, and then we're going to hit OK. And as you can see, what it's going to do is it's going to take every single frame and it's going to dump it into its own layer. Now, this should look very familiar if you viewed the earlier part of this video where we took those photos of the dragon turning around. It's doing the exact same thing as that. It's taking every single frame that we want, dumping it into its own separate layer, and it's nice and conveniently put it right into the timeline for us. And it's even already gone ahead and spaced out the time frame so that it lines up with the time frame of the video. Now, at this point, the work has already been done. The only thing we really have to do is make this a little bit smaller. If we go up here to Image Size, we can see this is 1080 pixels wide. That's a little bit bigger than we would need an animated GIF. So I'm going to set this to 500 pixels wide. It automatically scales this to 333. I'm going to hit OK. And now it's a little bit smaller. And from here, everything should look pretty familiar. We're just going to go up to File. We are going to go to Export, Save for Web Legacy like we've done before. Have it set to GIF, Save. And we're going to call this Litwin. Why though? And hit save. Now, if we go into here, there's our reaction GIF, which is just lovely. Now that method is great if we're not adding anything to the video. It was nice and convenient. It took everything and just dumped it into its own layer. But what if we want to add some kind of a caption on this? Well, as you know from before, anytime that we turn each one of these layers into a frame, we can't add anything else, any kind of text over top of it, without adding it to each and every single one of these layers, or else it will only show up as a frame by itself. So if you've watched the earlier part of this video, you know that there is another method that we can use, and that is to create a video timeline. In order to do that, we're going to go ahead and we're going to open up a new file. And if you'll remember, we resized this to 500 pixels by 333 pixels. That is what we're going to do here. We create a new file, and then we go up to Place Embedded. And we're going to embed the video in here. When we click Place Embedded, we're going to go to the same Why Though video clip. I'm going to hit place, and it automatically has it's the same proportions as the video clip. We hit enter, and it puts it here as a smart object. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go down here to the timeline, and we have this drop menu that you've seen before. We can either create a video timeline or create a frame animation. We're going to want to stick with a video timeline, and when we click on that menu, it automatically takes this and it drops it into a video timeline, and we can scrub the playhead, and you can see that as we go through, it automatically has the animation. Now, the nice part about that is we can add another layer that is a type layer. And we're going to type why though. And as you can see, it's already taken that type layer and it's dropped it right on top here in the video timeline. So as you scroll through, it doesn't disappear. It's always there. Now, I don't really want this to show up on the video until I make this face. And actually, you know what? Let's go back to the beginning. I don't even want the video to start until I start to put my hands up. So what we're going to do is we're going to go onto this layer. We're going to grab the edge of it, and we're going to pull it all the way to here to where I start to make that face. And then we're going to bring this all the way back to the beginning. And then I don't want this type to show up until I do that. So I'm going to grab the edge of this and pull it right there. Let's zoom out a little bit so we can see everything. I'm going to grab the edge of this and snap it to the end of the video itself. And now what we should have is both parts of this video ending at the same time. Now we're going to go up here to this little gear icon for the playback, and it is looped, so when we hit play, this should go over and over again. And it's already set the frame rate to the exact same frame rate as the video, so from this point all we have to do is go up here to File, go to Export, Save for Web Legacy, and as before with every other version of this in Photoshop, we're going to just make sure that it's in as a GIF. We're going to hit Save, and we'll go over here and we'll call this Litwin Y Though 2. And now it should be saved here. There's our first one that has no text, and here's our second one that has text that shows up. So those are the different methods of doing this in Photoshop. And next we will look at Adobe After Effects. Now, creating an animated GIF from a video clip in After Effects is going to look very, very similar to the second method that we used in Photoshop, where we used the video timeline feature. Now, what we're going to do here is in After Effects, we're going to go up to Composition, we're going to create a new composition, and we're going to have it 500 pixels wide by 330 pixels tall, because we know that that was the dimensions that we were working with in Photoshop. I really have no idea how long this is going to be, so I'm going to set this up to say 15 seconds for right now. And we can always trim it down later. We have a frame rate of 30 frames per second. We're going to hit OK. And here is our composition, and here is the stage for our composition. The next thing we're going to do is import that movie file that we were working from. So we're going to go up to File, Import, and Import File. And here we have that Litwin Y Though movie file that we were working from. We're going to hit Open. And now it imports it here into our project window. We are going to take this and we're going to drag it here onto our stage, which automatically puts it down here in the timeline. But as you can see, it's a little big because we did make this a smaller stage than the actual video itself. So what we're going to do is we are going to zoom out. I'm going to grab one of these corners. I'm going to hold down the Shift key, and I'm going to scale this video down. So now it fits on the stage. And just like before, we don't necessarily, or I don't necessarily, want to have this part where I'm looking back and forth with my eyes. I want this video to start right about here where the squint starts. So I'm going to put the playhead right here, and then I'm going to grab the front end of this video, and I'm going to drag it up to here so that there's nothing, and then it starts right at that part of the video. Then we are going to take that and bring it all the way back to the 0-second mark. And let's go to the end of this video and see where we're at. Now we can see that when we put this playhead here, this is at the 2-second and 17 frame mark. That's how long this is going to be. So we go back up here to Composition, we go to our Composition Settings, and now we know how long to make this. We're going to get rid of 15, we're going to put in 0.2, and just to make it easy, I'm going to say 15. So it's literally 2.5 seconds long if this is a 30 frame per second frame rate. We hit OK. Now you see it has trimmed our timeline down completely, and it is starting at exactly the part where I wanted it to start. Now we're going to go ahead and add some text just like we did before. And to do that, we're going to use the text tool up here at the top. I'm going to click on that T, come over here, and draw a little box right here. And now we have some text popping up. And inside of this window, I am going to type, just like we did before. I'm going to leave it at a different font so we can differentiate this from the last GIF that we did. And then we'll go back over here to the arrow selection tool. Use that to move this around. And as you can see, as we scrub through the timeline with this playhead, you can see that the text is present for the entire thing. I don't really want it to pop up until we get to, say, this point. So with the playhead right here, I'm going to go down here to the beginning of our typography. I'm going to drag that to the edge there and leave it where it's at, and now it does not pop up until we get to that point. And if we hit the space bar, we can cycle through this and preview it. As you can see, it's already looping. So now we've already had the file set up. We go up here to File, and we are going to export, and we're going to add this to the Adobe Media Encoder queue. And what that does is when we do that, it bounces over here to the Media Encoder. And as before, if you've watched this previously, you know that whatever we named the composition is what the name of the GIF is. And we're just going to go ahead and make sure this is set on animated GIF. If you go in here to the first part where it says animated GIF, you have a whole bunch of different options. You can do it as an H.264, you can do it as an MP3, you can do it as an MPEG. We're going to keep it on animated GIF. Hit OK. And with this selected, we push the play button. And it certainly doesn't take very long. And then if we click on this, it should take us straight to where it is here in our Finder. And there it is. There is our animated GIF using After Effects. And I guess for the sake of tidy housekeeping, we can go over here and take this composition and we can go ahead and bring it in here with the rest of our stuff, and we'll name this one Litwin Why Though 3. And there we go. There's how you create a animated GIF from video using Photoshop frame by frame, using Photoshop video timeline, and using After Effects. Hey guys, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share because my ego craves the approval of the internet. Otherwise, go forth, make cool stuff, and I'll see you next time.